"That's the wrong trick," said the new cashier to the Millionaire CEO seconds before the $200 million deal. Morning Brew was a small café tucked between two glass towers downtown, a favorite among office workers for its quiet atmosphere and strong coffee. The morning crowd had thinned to a low murmur of keyboards and spoons clinking against ceramic mugs. At a corner table near the window, Vincent Hale, 32, CEO of Hailstone Group, sat in a crisp navy suit. He was known for his sharp instincts and spotless negotiation record. Today, he was minutes away from signing a $200 million investment deal with a foreign partner, one that would expand Hailstone's real estate reach across 3 continents. Across from him sat Mr. Lang, a smooth-talking executive with a polished accent and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Between them lay a printed copy of the final contract. Vincent scanned through it while Lang sipped his espresso, waiting for the signature that would seal the deal. Behind the counter, Lillian Grace, 26, worked the register, a new cashier, just 2 weeks into the job. She was quiet, fast, and polite, always tucked behind her apron and soft blonde ponytail. Though she kept mostly to herself, she was sharply observant. As she approached to clean the nearby condiment counter, she couldn't help overhearing snippets of their conversation. Her ears caught a phrase, revenue distribution clause, year 3 adjustment, and something in her instinct flared. She paused, pretending to wipe down the table behind them. She listened closely. The numbers being quoted, the phrasing of percentages, and the mention of thresholds, they didn't add up. Her pulse quickened. She had studied finance. She knew contracts. She knew exactly what that kind of clause was meant to do. It was a trap, one that looked fair on the surface, but would in practice leave Hailstone carrying the lion's share of the risk, while Lang's firm reaped the returns with little accountability. It was designed to bleed a company dry under the guise of equal partnership. Lillian looked down at the rag in her hand. She knew she had no place in this conversation. No one ever listened to the cashier, but she also knew what silence would cost. She took a breath, steadied her nerves, and moved forward with a plan forming in her mind. Carrying a tray with 2 glasses of water, she walked up to the table. As she set one down, she accidentally tipped the second, splashing it onto Mr. Lang's sleeve. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir," she gasped, grabbing a stack of napkins. "There's a restroom just around the corner." "You can get that cleaned up right away," Lang muttered under his breath and excused himself, heading toward the back. Lillian turned to Vincent, her voice dropped to a whisper. "That's the wrong trick," she said, her eyes steady. "There's a problem with the contract. The clause on revenue sharing. It's structured to shift risk onto your company after year 2. It sounds like a standard adjustment, but it is not. If you sign it, Hailstone will bleed money badly." Vincent blinked, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" She didn't waver. "I know I'm just a cashier, but I studied finance and I've seen this before." The way he described the clause, it's predatory. You need to check your version of the contract against that printout. For a moment, he just stared at her, trying to decide if this was a bizarre prank or something real. Then, something in her expression, a kind of reluctant urgency, made him reach for his laptop. He opened the verified copy of the contract his legal team had cleared and scrolled quickly. Page 17, Clause 4. He compared it with the printed version on the table. His jaw tightened. There was a discrepancy. When Mr. Lang returned, dabbing his damp sleeve, Vincent was ready. "This clause," Vincent said evenly, pointing to the document. "Was this change cleared with my team?" Lang hesitated. It's a minor language revision, just phrasing. Vincent slid his laptop across the table. This isn't phrasing. This changes how back-end losses are calculated. Conveniently in your favor, Lang faltered. I assumed it was cleared. You assumed wrong, Lang stiffened. Maybe we should postpone the signing until legal can. Yeah, Vincent said coldly. Maybe we should. Lang quickly gathered his briefcase and excused himself, leaving the cafe without finishing his espresso. Vincent sat back, eyes still on the contract, stunned. His mind was already racing through what might have happened. What almost did. He looked toward the counter. Lillian was back behind the register, calmly ringing up a customer like she hadn't just saved a $200 million company from disaster. He walked over slowly, voiced low but firm. You did not just save me, he said. You saved my entire company. Vincent sat motionless in the same corner booth, the untouched contract still in front of him. His fingertips pressed against the polished wood. The noise of the cafe carried on, machines hissing, chairs scraping, soft conversations drifting, but it all blurred into a low hum. He had just been seconds away from signing away his company's future, and a stranger had stopped him. A shadow fell across the table. He looked up. Lillian stood there in her apron, a small dessert plate balanced on one hand. On it sat a single slice of coffee cake, golden brown with a dusting of powdered sugar. She set it gently in front of him. Sweet things help people calm down, she said quietly. It's from me. For a moment, Vincent could only stare at the cake. Then he looked at her face, open, calm, with the faintest trace of nerves beneath her steady eyes. He gestured to the seat across from him. Sit, please. She hesitated, then slid into the chair opposite, smoothing her apron. You knew about that clause, he said. How? Lillian took a small breath. I used to run a small shop downtown. Specialty goods, handmade candles, soaps. It was doing well until an investor came along with what I thought was a perfect deal. I signed. The terms looked fair, but they weren't. Within a year, I lost everything. Her eyes flicked down to the cake between them. After that, I took courses in accounting, nights, weekends, whatever I could afford. I wanted to understand contracts, numbers, tricks. I told myself, if I ever saw something like that again, I wouldn't stay quiet. She looked up at him. That's why I spoke. Not because of you, because of what I know those numbers can do to people. Vincent listened without interrupting. He was used to polished pitches, to people dressing up their intentions. But this woman's words were plain, her voice low and steady. I studied so I wouldn't repeat my mistakes, she added, and so that no one else would if I could help it. He glanced down at the cake, then back at her. You've helped me more than you know. She stood up, brushing crumbs from her apron. I should get back to work. Vincent reached into his briefcase and pulled out a plain envelope. He slid it across the table. Take this, he said. It's not charity, it's a thank you. You just saved my company. Her hand stayed at her sides. I don't need a reward for telling the truth, she said softly. I was just doing what was right. Please, she shook her head, a small, polite smile on her lips. Enjoy the cake. Then she turned and walked back behind the counter. While she was turned away, Vincent quietly stood, walked over, and slipped the envelope into the pocket of her apron hanging by the register, so gently that she did not notice. The next morning, the lobby of Hailstone's headquarters gleamed under the early light. Lillian stood just inside the revolving doors, holding the same envelope. She had come on her break. The receptionist looked up as she approached. I need to return this to Mr. Hale, she said, setting the envelope on the counter. I cannot accept it. The woman behind the desk frowned. He's in a meeting. That's fine, Lillian said. Just please make sure he gets it. She gave a small nod and walked back toward the doors. Outside, a thin, elderly man sat against the marble wall of the building. His clothes threadbare, a paper cup between his knees. Lillian knelt down, spoke to him softly, and handed him the sandwich she had been carrying for her own lunch. She tucked a few bills into the cup, patted his hand, and rose. From the corner office high above, Vincent stood at the window, phone silent in his hand. Through the glass, he watched the small scene unfold. Lillian kneeling, smiling gently at the old man, then straightening her shoulders and disappearing into the stream of pedestrians. He said nothing. He only stood there for a long time. The returned envelope on his desk, the taste of coffee cake still faint on his tongue. She had refused his money. She had saved his company, and she had walked away. The next afternoon, morning brew was quieter than usual. A light rain tapped against the windows, softening the buzz of conversation inside. Lillian stood behind the counter, carefully organizing the receipts from the morning rush. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tidy low bun, and there were faint circles under her eyes, the kind you only noticed if you were paying close attention. Vincent Hale walked in without his usual suit jacket, just a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. No laptop, no papers, just a simple envelope in hand, and something determined in his step. Lillian looked up, surprised, but composed. Back for another slice of cake, she asked, trying to smile. Vincent returned the smile, though his was gentler, more thoughtful. Not this time, he said. I came to speak with you. She set the receipt stack aside. Sure, what's on your mind? He hesitated for a beat, then held out the envelope. This is an offer, he said. A formal one. She didn't take it immediately. For what? A consulting role. Internal financial advisory. Part-time to start a month trial. You'd be reviewing our risk protocols and contract structures, essentially making sure what happened the other day never happens again. Lillian's face changed. Her fingers brushed the envelope, but she didn't open it. I don't think I'm qualified, she said quietly. I never finished my degree. I haven't worked in finance. I've only studied part-time, read books, watched lectures online when I could. Vincent didn't move. And yet you saw something a room full of professionals missed. She looked away. That was one moment. No, that was one kind of courage. The kind you don't find easily. You listened. You recognized a threat and you acted. That's what I need in my company. Not just credentials, character. Lillian gave a soft laugh under her breath. Sounds like you're romanticizing me. I'm not, he said. I'm being very practical. People are scared to speak up when money is on the line. They nod, they stay quiet. You didn't, that matters. She finally opened the envelope and scanned the brief offer letter. The compensation made her blink. I don't want you to think I'm doing this out of guilt or gratitude. Vincent added, I'm not hiring you because you saved me. I'm asking you to come on board because I believe you're exactly the kind of mind we need. Lillian was quiet for a long moment, the paper still in her hands. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course. He turned to leave, but paused just before the door. I'll be back tomorrow, same time. If your answer is no, I'll still order coffee and thank you again for what you did. If it's yes, he shrugged. Well, then it's a start. The next day, Vincent returned. Lillian wasn't behind the counter. A different cashier nodded toward the back where she was finishing her break. She came out a minute later, wiping her hands on her apron, her expression unreadable. "Good afternoon," he said. "Good afternoon," she replied, then held up the envelope, this time with her signature at the bottom of the offer letter. "I'll try for a month," she said, "but I won't pretend to know everything." Vincent smiled. "I'm not asking you to pretend. Just be who you were that day." Lillian nodded, folded the letter fully, and slid it back into the envelope. "I can do that." And just like that, the girl behind the register stepped out from behind the counter and into the chance to reclaim the future she thought she had lost. During her first few weeks at Hailstone, Lillian moved through the office like a quiet current, steady, focused, and deliberate. She asked smart questions, listened more than she spoke, and always turned in her work on time, if not early. The team was beginning to respect her, even if they didn't fully understand how someone who used to work behind a coffee counter had suddenly become indispensable in a boardroom. But there was one person who noticed everything. Vincent Hale, the man who once lived in numbers and legal clauses, now found himself paying attention to smaller things, things no spreadsheet could measure. Every morning, Lillian arrived at her desk to find a cup of coffee waiting for her. Not just any coffee, but exactly how she liked it. Black, no sugar, extra hot. At first, she assumed it was from the office assistant. But one morning, she arrived earlier than usual and caught Vincent quietly placing the cup on her desk. He looked up slightly startled, then smiled. "You do better work when you're properly She laughed under her breath, but said nothing. She picked up the coffee and took a sip. It was perfect. On nights when the team stayed late, pushing to finalize investor reports or review new contracts, Vincent stayed too, not in his office behind closed doors, but right beside her. While others clocked out, Vincent pulled up a chair, rolled up his sleeves, and worked in silence beside her. He didn't offer to help or hover. He just stayed. "I figured 2 people working quietly is better than 1, he once said with a soft smile, handing her a granola bar when she skipped dinner again. And then came the night that changed everything. It had been raining since late afternoon. The city streets were slick with reflections of headlights and traffic lights. Hailstone's office, now nearly empty, echoed with the low hum of printers and the occasional cough from someone still typing away in another cubicle. Lillian had insisted on staying late to complete a last-minute audit check. Vincent had stayed too, as usual, saying nothing, just letting her do her work while he caught up on his own. By the time they wrapped up, it was well past 10. "I'll call a car," Lillian said, gathering her things. Vincent shook his head. "Let me drive you." "It's pouring." She didn't argue. The rain pounded harder as they drove through the city, the windshield wipers working double time. Lillian sat in the passenger seat, quiet, her eyes heavy from exhaustion. By the time they reached her building, she had fallen asleep. Her head was resting gently against the window, her blonde hair damp from the earlier dash to the car. Her hands were loosely folded in her lap. She looked peaceful. Vincent turned off the engine and sat there, unsure of what to do. Wake her, let her rest. He reached for the wool blazer he had tossed into the back seat and with slow, deliberate hands draped it over her shoulders. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Then, instead of leaving or speaking, he just sat there. The rain tapped gently on the roof. The city continued outside, but in the car time slowed. He watched her sleep. her brow finally her breathing soft and steady. He didn't know when it had started. This feeling, maybe it was the moment she refused to take his money. Or maybe it was the way she always listened more than she talked, or how she always put others first without even realizing it. But here, in this car, watching her sleep beneath his jacket, Vincent knew it clearly. He was falling for her, not because of what she had done for him, but because of who she was. Quiet, strong, honest, the kind of woman who saved a company and never asked for anything in return. Still, he said nothing. He let her sleep a while longer, and when the time felt right, he gently spoke her name. She stirred, blinked at him sleepily, and smiled when she realized where she was. "Sorry," she murmured. "I didn't mean to." "You're fine," he said softly. "Let's get you home." He never mentioned the jacket, and she never gave it back. From that night on, something unspoken lingered between them. Not rushed, not named, just understood. And Vincent knew he would wait as long as it took, because when something is real, it doesn't need to be rushed. It just needs to be respected. The storm did not come from the sky this time. It came from headlines. It started with a single blog post from a gossip site buried beneath celebrity divorces and political scandals. A former corker from Lillian's short-lived retail business had recognized her in a candid photo taken outside Hailstone headquarters. The headline read, "From cash register to corner office. CEO Vincent Hale's mysterious connection to a café cashier." The story wasn't just invasive, it was cruel. The article made pointed comments about Lillian's looks, her meteoric rise, and questioned the nature of her relationship with Vincent. Words like favoritism, office romance, and trading charm for power were tossed around freely. Other outlets picked it up. Social media lit up with speculation and nastiness. By the following day, the narrative had taken hold. She must have used her looks to get where she is. No one just accidentally catches a CEO's eye. Lillian saw it all on her phone, in whispers at the office, in the lingering glances of colleagues who never used to look at her twice. Her inbox was flooded. Anonymous messages, threats, screenshots sent by concerned friends. Her mother called, worried and shaken. She tried to ignore it, but it crept into every corner of her life. By the third day, she printed out a resignation letter and walked it to Vincent's office. She knocked once, stepped inside, and placed the envelope on his desk. "I can't stay," she said simply. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's affecting your reputation, the company." Vincent didn't touch the letter. He leaned back in his chair, studied her face. "You want to leave?" he said, "because people are uncomfortable with the idea that you earned your place." "No," she said, "because they're saying I didn't." He was quiet for a moment. Then he pushed the envelope back toward her. "I'm not signing that." She blinked. "Vincent, you're not going anywhere, Lillian," he said, voice calm but resolute. "If anyone should leave, it's the people spreading lies, not the one who told the truth when it mattered." She swallowed hard, her fingers curled against the edge of the desk. "I don't want to be a liability to you," she said. "You're not," he replied. "You're the reason I still have a company to protect." Later that afternoon, Vincent stood in front of a podium at a hastily arranged press conference. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. He spoke clearly, without notes. "There's been a lot of talk about how a young woman went from cashier to corporate. So, let me be absolutely clear. Lillian Grace didn't sleep her way into this company. She saved it. She uncovered a financial trap in a multi-million-dollar contract before my entire legal team saw it. She acted not out of personal gain, but integrity. She did what most people in this city are too afraid to do. She spoke up. She is not the reason my reputation is under fire. She is the reason I still have one. The room fell silent. The statement went viral within hours. People began digging. Not into Lillian's past, but into the failed deal, the clause she flagged, the truth behind the story. Gradually, public opinion shifted. She didn't respond to the news cycle. She kept working, but she found a note waiting on her desk the next morning, written in Vincent's familiar hand. Let the world say what it wants. I know the truth, and that's the only thing that matters. The worst of the media frenzy had passed. The news cycle had shifted. The gossip sites had moved on, and the office buzz had returned to projects, meetings, and deadlines. But for Vincent, something had changed. He had gone quiet, not distant, but quieter in a way that suggested he was thinking more than speaking. His attention was no longer just on profit margins and quarterly forecasts. It had shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, toward one person. And while he never said a word about it, his actions spoke volumes. A week after the press conference, Barbara Grace, Lillian's mother, was scheduled for a major medical procedure. It had been delayed twice due to costs, insurance disputes, and waiting lists. But out of nowhere, the hospital called. The entire treatment had been approved, paid for in full. The invoice had one line printed where the patient's payment details would normally be from someone who believes in you. Barbara asked Lillian if she knew who it was. Lillian shook her head even though her gut already knew the truth. Not long after, her younger brother Noah, a freshman at a small state college, received an unexpected email from the university's financial office. A full academic scholarship had been deposited into his account, covering all tuition, books, and living expenses for the next 3 years. The letter attached read simply, "For the student who inspires her." Lillian sat alone in her apartment that night, the 2 letters in her lap, her mind racing. She had never told Vincent about the mounting hospital bills, never mentioned that Noah had been working 2 part-time jobs just to afford textbooks. She hadn't needed to. The next morning, she walked into Vincent's office unannounced. He looked up from his desk, surprised, but not unkind. "Is everything all right?" She stepped forward slowly, then set the letters down on his desk. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. He looked at the papers, but didn't deny anything. "I know," he said. "Then why?" Her voice wavered, not with anger, just disbelief. "Why go this far?" Vincent leaned back in his chair. He didn't rush his answer. "Because I believe in more than just numbers," he said. "I believe in doing what's right when you can. You didn't ask me for anything, Lillian. You never expected anything in return. But you gave me more than I deserved. Your honesty, your strength, your voice. When I needed it most." He glanced at the letters again, then back at her. "I didn't do it because I owe you," he said softly. "I did it because I think your family deserves a chance to breathe again, to live without carrying everything on their backs." Lillian stood in silence for a moment, her hands at her sides. "Thank you," she said finally. He nodded once. "You're welcome." She left the office without another word. But as the door clicked, softly shut behind her, Vincent allowed himself a moment, just one, to close his eyes and breathe. Things slowly returned to a quiet rhythm at Hailstone. Lillian continued working with the same quiet diligence she had shown since her first day. She sat in on meetings, reviewed contracts, and carved out a place for herself, not just as the girl who saved a company, but as someone trusted, respected, and heard. She and Vincent still kept things professional. No rumors, no whispers, no late-night texts or stolen moments behind closed doors. But something had shifted. It was in the way his gaze lingered a beat longer when she walked into a room. It was in the way her voice softened just slightly when she said his name. They never spoke of what hung between them, but it was there. In coffee cups left on desks, in wordless glances exchanged during meetings, in the silence that was no longer awkward but warm. One evening, long after the office had emptied, they found themselves in the boardroom, both still working, though the deadline had long passed. The only light came from the city outside, casting a silver hue across the table. Lillian sat at one end, reading through a revised clause. Vincent stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching her as if seeing her for the first time again. The quiet stretched soft and safe. Then, without turning, Vincent spoke. "I'm not very good at this," he said. She looked up at talking about what I feel, he added. He turned to face her fully. No suits of armor, no polished CEO mask, just a man with something to say. "I think I started falling for you the moment you gave back that envelope," he said. "Or maybe even before that. Or..." Lillian's lips parted in surprise, but she didn't speak. Vincent stepped closer slowly. "And I know we've never crossed a line, and I've done everything I can to respect that, but I need to be honest. Just once before this turns into something I regret not saying." He took a quiet breath. "I think I've loved you since the moment you refused my money." A long pause, then, soft, unexpected, Lillian smiled. She set the document aside and leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "I know," she said simply. Vincent blinked. "You do." She laughed gently. "Vincent, you brewed me black coffee without asking. Not once, not twice, every morning." His shoulders relaxed just a little. "That obvious?" She nodded. "That kind of attention. That's not corporate courtesy." He smiled. "So what now?" Lillian met his eyes, steady, sure, and a little playful. "Now," she said, "we keep doing what we've always done." He tilted his head, "which is building something real," she said. "One step at a time." And somehow that was more than enough. 1 year later, the office at Hailstone looked much the same. Glass walls, quiet efficiency, the scent of fresh coffee drifting through the hallways. But for those who paid attention, they would notice something had quietly, beautifully shifted. On the 6th floor, in a corner office filled with warm light and stacks of color-coded reports, Lillian Grace now sat as the company's director of financial oversight. The title plate on her door was understated. She had chosen it that way. She didn't need grandeur. She had built her reputation not on noise, but on trust. Lillian had come a long way from the girl behind the café register, and yet she had never forgotten where she came from. Her door was always open, her voice steady but kind. She didn't just lead, she guided. Her office reflected who she was: practical, intentional, and quietly proud. No awards framed on the walls, no ego on display, just a single glass-framed page hanging behind her desk. A page that had once almost cost a company everything. The misprinted contract from that rainy afternoon at Morning Brew. At the bottom, scrawled in neat, confident handwriting, was Vincent's message. She saved $200 million and saved my heart. Most people assumed it was a joke, a romantic gesture perhaps. But those who knew the full story understood that every word was true. Outside the walls of the company, Lillian's world had also grown brighter. Her mother, Barbara, had recovered fully and now spent her days volunteering at a senior care center, offering support to patients and their families. She often told people with a proud smile, "My daughter works for a big firm downtown. She helps keep the truth on paper." Her younger brother Noah had graduated with honors in environmental economics. He now interned at a non-profit and had plans to attend graduate school. On the back of his graduation cap, he had written for the sister who believed I could. As for Vincent and Lillian, they had never announced anything. No grand proposal, no engagement photos, no headlines. They had made a quiet, mutual decision. No wedding, at least not yet. No rings, no spotlight, just mornings. Every morning, without fail, the two of them would stand in the kitchen of the condo they now shared. The sun would filter through the blinds. He would brew her coffee, black, no sugar. She would toast his bread, always slightly burnt, just how he liked it. Some mornings were rushed, some were calm, but in all of them there was peace and partnership. They were equals, not just in the office, but in life. Both of them had built something not from fairy tale beginnings, but from shared values. Honesty, resilience, and the courage to speak the truth even when it was inconvenient. One afternoon, a young intern passed by Lillian's office and noticed the framed contract on her wall. "Did you really save $200 million? She asked, wide-eyed. Lillian glanced up from her screen, smiled, and said, "I saved a sentence." The girl blinked. "A sentence?" She nodded. A single sentence in that contract, but sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference. The intern paused, thoughtful, before continuing down the hall. Inside the office, Lillian returned to her work. Numbers, patterns, truth. But as her eyes flicked once more to the frame behind her, her smile deepened. Because this quiet moment, this steady life, this gentle love wasn't built on grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was built on a piece of cake offered on a hard day, on black coffee in the early morning, on doing the right thing when no one else would. And in the end, their story wasn't wrapped in roses. It was wrapped in respect, bound by integrity, and sealed by the quiet certainty that neither of them had to face life alone again. Thank you for watching this story until the very end. If it stirred something in your heart, even just a little, don't forget to hit the hype button and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales of love, courage, and the quiet moments that change everything. We believe that sometimes the smallest voices whisper the biggest truths, and sometimes a slice of cake and a little honesty